It is so invaluable, you guys, so invaluable for being able to get them to adhere to the plan and not fall off when things get hard or easy or painful or whatever. There's a million excuses of why they can fall off their schedule. You must remind them of the process and where they're at and how they're going to get to a place where this doesn't become this problem that is chronic and keeps coming back. Keep them in clarity. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Unchoreographed podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jenna Lower. I'm a physical therapist and dance medicine specialist and the owner of On Point Wellness and Rehab, which is a clinic where we specialize in dance medicine. Today, we are going to be talking about a really important topic that I get questions on all the time, which is how do I increase buy-in with my dancers? How do I make sure that when they come into my clinic, I can keep them here, keep them happy, and keep them consistent with a plan that's going to give them the results that they're looking for? We say it all the time that physical therapy only works if you work. We say this to our patients. But how do we make sure that they really understand that and then do it, right? How do we make sure that they do the work that it's going to take to get them the results? I have a few thoughts on this because I've been doing this for a really long time now. And I will say that the buy-in that I have here in my clinic with my dancers is really, really high. I have the majority of my patients aren't even new patients, they're returning patients. And I feel like that speaks volumes to making sure that my dancers understand, that we're able to make them understand why this is so important. And I want to share that with you because I think it can be really helpful, some helpful strategies to implement into your own clinical practice. If you guys are interested, I did compile a lot of this into a free resource for you. So if you want to download that, I will put it at the link below and you can grab your copy there to learn some of these strategies and kind of have it on hand. So what I did is I basically broke down some of the things that I think that we do really well here at On Point, and just the ones that I think would be the most helpful if you're not already doing these. So the first is to make sure that we provide, our dancers are looking for clarity and a clear path, right? A lot of times they've come in and they have been to multiple doctors already. They have talked to a lot of different people. They've tried all the things that they've seen on the internet and nothing has worked, right? A lot of times they're just like at their wit's end. They don't know what to do anymore. Now, this may not be all of our patients, but unfortunately, I think, with dancers, it's pretty common because there's not a lot of practitioners that understand dance. And so what a lot of our dancers are looking for, even if that hasn't been their journey, what a lot of our dancers are looking for is clarity. They want a clear path of how do I get from point A and point B? What are the results that I'm even looking for, right? They've got to get really clear on what they want. Like what are the goals that they have? What are the results that they're looking for? And once they're clear on that, then we can in return give them a really clear path of how to get to that point that they are looking to get to. If they're not clear on their goals and what they're here for and what they really want to get out of this experience, then we can't give them that path. And I think that also it's really important that we ask them those questions, right? We can only go so far in the goals that we have for our patients, right? We all have goals in our minds of what we want our patients to be able to do and where we want to be able to get them. For me, like I want all my patients to be performing at peak performance, as we call it here, and above and beyond what they were at when they were pre-injury. But what if the patient doesn't want that? What if they just don't want to have pain anymore and they're not interested in the long term? I mean, I think it's our job to teach them why the long term is important, but at the end of the day, if that's not important to them and it's not part of their goals and what brought them in, then we have to listen to that. And we can't try to impose our goals on them. We can help them arrive at the decision that brings them clarity as to what it is that they want and what they're looking for. But we have to kind of do that as a team approach versus us just telling them this is what your goals are and this is where you should be in all of this. It has to sort of be from both ends. So it's clarity on their end and then clarity on our end of like, hey, here's the path that we're going to take to get you to what you just told me your goals are. They need to understand the why behind the reason that we do things, right? I think that is right there is one of the biggest reasons that a lot of dancers, or anybody for that matter, fails out of physical therapy, quote unquote fails, is that they don't understand why they're doing something that they're doing. They need to understand why it's important, why it's related to their goals, or how it's related to their goals, and why this exercise is even going to get them from point A to point B. If they don't understand that, if they don't understand their injury, like what is happening inside their body, what muscle is the problem, what mobility restriction or strength restriction, if they don't understand the why or the how behind any of that, then nothing that you do moving forward will make any real impact for them. It might be a quick change. They might get some relief, but are they going to stay consistent with it and actually see long-term results? Probably not, because you haven't done a good job of teaching them and educating them the why behind it, and then they don't have that clear path that we should be laying out for them. So I think that really is first and foremost what we need to do. I don't think it's a bad idea to lay this out on a piece of paper for your clients or, laminate it. Something that I've implemented in the past year here in my practice is something, it's a pyramid, which basically takes them through the process of when they first come in to, we call it their breaking point, all the way up to their peak performance. And it lays out sort of what each phase looks like and the steps that we are going to take in each phase to get them to the top of that pyramid. Now, of course, it's not the same for every single person, but the general foundations of what we do are the same, right? We have to evaluate and find the root cause. Then we need to work on the movement patterns. And then we need to strengthen and make sure that they've got good mobility. And then we have to work on performance. And then we have to work on maintaining, right? So the framework of what we do is pretty similar. It's like a lot of people do like the 3-step process. The framework is going to be really similar. But then there's personalization in what you do within that, right? So, and making sure that you're personalizing that path for the patient. So they're saying that they're having trouble with, développé. How are we going to make sure that they can lift their leg past 90 degrees without that clicking or popping? And so, okay, well, we have to make sure that we assess the movement pattern and figure out where it's coming from. We need to make sure that you can do it without lifting your leg first. Can you just do it on the floor? Can you find your turnout? Then we start lifting. Maybe we only lift to 45 degrees and then we go to 90 degrees. So we can personalize any of that process, but the framework, if you can lay that out for a patient, visit 1. It's really important that you do this visit 1. It will make so much more sense to them. If you try to capture them on the back end once they're not having pain anymore, and then you're trying to say, now we got to maintain, now you need to keep coming because you're not all the way better yet, all they're going to hear or feel is, well, I don't have pain anymore, so I don't need to keep coming. You have to capture them on visit 1. You have to make sure that they understand that in this process, they're going to get to a point where their pain is gone, and we're going to get them there as soon as we possibly can. And most people, when they get to that point, that's when they stop. What I tell them is, when you get to that point, that's when we push harder. That's when we move the needle and we start working a lot on strength and conditioning and performance. And we make sure to get you to peak performance so that this problem is never going to come back again. And I think if you don't do that on day 1 and you don't lay out that process when they are in like dire need of clarity and of a path forward, you won't capture them for the long term. They will probably only stick with you up until their pain goes away, or maybe they only stick with you until they start to have a flare up of pain again a little bit, and then they're like, this doesn't work. But think about it. If beforehand you tell them, you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have periods where you think you're like, it gets better and your pain is better, right? It's not like you just thinking it really is better, but you're at risk of going back in the wrong direction. If we don't keep doing XYZ, then the moment they get there, they're going to stop, or they're going to panic when they start to feel pain again. Lay that process out day one. It will provide them so much clarity, and they will be thankful that they have this very clear path forward, and they're going to remember it the entirety of their plan of care with you. So just, if you don't know what your process is, get really clear on it. Write it down, have a laminated copy that you can visually walk through, patient journey, whatever it is to you in your clinic, that you can show somebody on visit one. And like, it just, having that concrete piece of paper even gives them such comfort in knowing, okay, she knows what she's doing. She's done this before. I know that I can follow this process and be really successful. So I think that is the most important piece of it. Okay, so we've done that. We've started therapy with them. How do we keep them in it? How do we keep them engaged? I think, again, one of the reasons that we see dancers start to fall off our schedule or become less accountable to themselves or committed, consistent, is that the therapy is not being appropriately adjusted to whatever their needs are. So again, like we talked about knowing what their goals are. The patient must know, like, what are their goals? What do they want to get out of this? And we need to make sure that our exercises and plan is addressing that. If they tell us that their goal is to be able to lift their leg above 90 degrees, and we don't get them working on something that even remotely resembles that until 6 weeks in, they're going to be like, well, what the heck? We didn't even address the thing I came in for. Now, I'm not saying you should jump ahead 5 steps and just start doing things before they're ready, but you can start immediately relating back exercises to what their goal is. So maybe it is, being able to lift their leg higher. Maybe you're starting with a supine bracing in a march. Well, why do we do that? We do that because you have to know how to stabilize through the core, and that marching motion is the exact same muscle that you need to use when you're standing with a développé, but it's much harder because there's all this other stuff going on and we're against gravity, right? But if you don't explain that to them, they're just going to say, well, they're not listening to me. They're not working on my développé, and that's the only reason that I came in here. So you have to initially relate that right back. And you may need to tell them, like, hey, listen, I know that your goal is to get to this, and we are going to work on that. But we need to do step 1, 2, and 3 before we can get you to that point. Otherwise, we risk your pain flaring back up, or whatever it is. We don't want you to go the other direction. So keep them in the loop, keep them a part of your clinical thinking process so that they understand the why behind what, I'm doing this, but it's my end goal is still there, right? She hasn't forgot about it. She's not ignoring my needs. I think what also kind of goes along with adjusting to the client's needs is making sure that their therapy isn't too easy. Many of our dancers are really, really strong when they come in, right? We're not questioning that they're strong or not. We know they are. They wouldn't be able to do the things that they do if they didn't have good core strength and all of this. And so we have to make sure that our exercises reflect the current amount of strength that they have. We have to make sure that we are appropriately dosing their exercises. If they feel like, I can't tell you how many times I've had a dancer that's come in here and said, well, I did physical therapy, but I just didn't feel like it worked because it was too easy. Like I would fly through the exercises. And I asked them what they did, and they're like, well, I pointed into a TheraBand and, did stuff like that. Well, yeah, of course, pointing into a TheraBand, while it has its place temporarily, right, if you're really inflamed, long term, that's not going to get you anywhere. You are not loading those ankle tendons and muscles even close to enough to what it takes to be able to do it standing in releve on point against gravity. So we have to make sure that, okay, yes, maybe that's where we start, but as we're progressing through therapy, we are paying attention to, am I appropriately dosing my exercises based on where they are at? Something that I use in my clinic that I stand strongly by is RPE. I absolutely, I have a copy of this. There's a research article that I love, but I keep paper copies of RPE right next to me. These are right at my desk here. And I pull them out pretty much every single visit a patient comes in, and until they know that process. But I track RPE pretty consistently with my patients. It may be at the end of a workout, it may be with each individual exercise, but I'm constantly getting them used to that process of, hey, let's do some squats, and at the end, how difficult was that? Let me tell me how hard that was. Because now I'm getting real-time feedback of, I mean, I can certainly get it from what does it look like, but I want to know, what does it feel like to the dancer? Does it feel hard? Generally, what I tell I use reps in reserve, kind of related to RPE. So RPE is obviously rate of exertion. So, 0 to 10 or whatever, how hard is it? There's a really good research study, which again, I'll link this one for you guys, because this is where I get this from, this piece of paper that I showed you. And I use this with my patient, where it will relate RPE to reps in reserve. And if you're not familiar with reps in reserve, what that basically is how many reps do you have left in the tank? So you finish your 3 sets of 10. At the end of that, how many more reps do you feel like you can do? Do you feel like you can do 10 more? The exercise is probably too easy. Do you feel like you maxed out, like you can barely get one more? The exercise is probably too hard. What I tell my dancers, all my patients, to aim for is somewhere in the 2 to 4 reps in reserve range, 2 to 3 if they're a little bit more familiar with the process, 4, maybe even a 5 reps in reserve if they are just learning like movement patterns and stuff and they're not quite on just the strength phase yet. But at 2 to 4 is sort of where I tell people I want them to be. I want them to feel like they've done the work. They could maybe push out 2 or 3 more reps. We know it's hard enough that way, but they're not going so far that they're maxing out. They're going to overload consistently, lose their form, all of that. Maxing out has its place, right? Like we do that all the time in the strength and conditioning world, but generally in the rehab sense, we're not doing that. And we don't want to be doing that with people who, of course, aren't familiar with lifting and all of that. But you can use reps in reserve and RPE in any exercise that you do. It doesn't need to be just a barbell or weights. It can be any exercise. So what I recommend is that you have a way to track this with your patient as they are doing their home exercise program. You can leverage technology. You can use it through an app. You could do it through a Google Doc. You could have them, like, you could make like an Excel spreadsheet that they fill out for you and bring back to you. I obviously am a big fan of leveraging technology, so I do it through the app that I use for their programming. But then I have some patients that are like, I don't really want to use the app, so I print them out a copy. The younger girls, a lot of times just like I'll print out a chart. And basically what I tell them to do is track. So you write the date of your exercise, and at the end of your workout, you're just going to tell me what your RPE was. And that is really, really helpful, because if they are coming in and they are constantly telling me, my RPE is like a 9 and they're still having pain, well, it's probably because maybe the exercises actually are making it worse in this case. You're pushing maybe a little bit too hard. A lot of our dancers like to push really, really hard, and we have to pull back a little bit. So, maybe we need to just teach them, hey, that's too much. This is where you need to be. This is the range that I want you in, and this is why. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they're coming in and they're like, oh, it's like a 2. Well, that also is not going to move the needle. That's not going to get them stronger. It's not going to help them meet their goals long term. So we have to make sure we're getting them to an appropriate dosage. And the only way you're going to know that is by asking for continuous feedback. It's really good for you. It's really good for the dancer, because the dancer can then understand what you're going after. And again, it comes back to providing more clarity. The other big one that I see people failing at a lot is that you're not taking into account the dancer's schedule. Now, we talk about this all the time. I talk about this with every colleague. Oh, these schedules are so crazy. They're so busy, this, that, and whatever. But then we want them to do therapy. And sometimes we're giving them this big, long list of things to do, and they don't have time for it. They have no reference of like why it's important to even make time for this. So like if we want them to make time for something, number one, they better understand why they need to make time for it and how it's going to help them. So back to providing clarity. But then we have to work with them. You need to be asking them questions on their first visit or close to their first visit. What is your schedule in detail, right? Like, what are the days? How many hours do you have dance on this day? What classes do you have? Like, I ask all of these questions on visit one. I even have a section in my intake paperwork where they can put in sort of roughly what their schedule is. Are they rehearsing on the weekend? Are they off on the weekends? Are they doing any other activities? Are they already going to the gym? Like, we usually ask these questions, but I want you to use it. Once you know what their schedule is, work their physical therapy, their home exercises around that schedule. Sometimes it's true that we need them to pull back a little bit. Their intensity at dance, their volume at dance might be a little bit too much. And then we do need to ask them to sometimes take a bit of a step back. If that's your first solution, though, chances are the dancer is going to run in the other direction. They are much more likely to stay on with you and to tell their friends if you're willing to work with the schedule that they have been given. They often will come to the realization themselves or with their parent that the schedule that they're keeping is too intense without me having to say, this is crazy, you need to not do this many classes. They will often come to that decision on their own. But if I'm just saying, I need you to not do this and I need you to do this exercise instead, they're running for the door. They're probably not ever going to come back to see me, or maybe they'll do it for a little while, but then they're going to be like, I don't have pain anymore. I'm good. I'm out. So, but if we're willing to work with their schedule, you're going to create a partnership there. You're going to create a really, really good relationship with them. They're probably going to refer their friends to you. They're probably going to tell their studio about you. So you're also kind of doing some marketing work a little bit at the same time. But generally what I will, kind of the first thing is I'm like, okay, so what's your schedule? And then I ask them, like, realistically, how many days a week do you think you could get to these exercises? Now, the amount of exercises that I'm going to give them is also dependent on what their answer is, right? Because for me, I am of the mindset that consistency, I think most of us are of the mindset that consistency is more important than anything. So rather than having this really big, long, elaborate program, maybe we're just picking 2 or 3 things that they can be really, really consistent with. Maybe they're things that get their pain level down. Maybe they're just accessory things. Maybe they don't have pain anymore, but it's just accessory things for strengthening. Pick just a few things that they can be consistent with versus this big, long, crazy program. Now, I definitely do the big, long, crazy programs. I do 4-week programs for people where it's really all built out, but we are building it as we are going. Do we start there? No, absolutely not. We start with 2 or 3 things really consistently. Day 1, it's usually just 1 thing, and then maybe 2 things. I never go over 4, maybe 5 exercises. I'd say 5 is the max amount of exercises that I'll ever give anybody in a day. And even 5 is a lot, right? It's probably around 3 or 4 because I know that that's something they can be consistent about. But again, I'm asking them, do you think that you can be consistent with 3 or 4? Be honest with me, because if you can't be consistent, we are taking it down to 1 or 2. And so have that discussion with them constantly. It's not just the first time you give it to them, it's repetitively. Hey, are you getting your things in? Do we need to modify? Do we need to make a change? Is this working for you? What's not working? How can we make it better? Every single session, have this conversation with them. They will feel heard and seen and paid attention to, and that their goals are important to you as the therapist. So you really want to be asking these things regularly, making sure that the plan is working for them, not just that it's working for us as the physical therapist. Now, you might have to get to the point where you do have a come to Jesus talk, right? Like eventually we have to make sure our dancers are doing something. They have to do the work. And so everyone's plan is going to be a little different of what's going to work for them, but you need to be tracking and making sure that they're staying accountable with the things that you have given them, even if it is just 1 or 2 things. So I think you could, again, leverage technology here. I really, really have enjoyed using the app because it tracks everything. I tell them, hey, I can see what you're doing. It sends it to me. We can make sure that you're staying on top of things. They really like that too. Parents really like that for accountability. But maybe you don't want to spend the money on paying for an app, you're just starting out. Well, I used to use Google Docs. I would copy and paste in the videos of things that I wanted them to do. I would put an exercise log in there that had, check it, the reps that you did for the day, the weight you used, if there was weight involved, and the RPE, and they would log it there. That's a perfectly acceptable way to do it, and it's free. And as long as you have a paid Google account, it's HIPAA compliant. So, and you can copy it over, save a copy into your EMR system or a paper copy, whatever you need. It's cheap, easy, and it keeps them accountable, right? They can put comments, they can put notes on it. So if they want some feedback on something or they want to not forget something that happened while they were exercising, tell them to put a comment in there. Make sure they're an editor in that Google Doc. If you're using an app, they can message you right through the app. So having ways that they can, between your sessions with them, still be communicating with you. And maybe you're not necessarily looking at that every single day, but when they come back in for their visit, it's all laid out right there, right? Because how many times do they come in and you're like, okay, how did the past week go? And they like blank out. They don't remember the past week. But if it's all written down, then you can ask them those questions. Hey, you wrote here that this was an issue or this was too easy. Let's address that. Let's make it harder this week, whatever it needs to be. So I think moral of the story here is you have to figure out what works for your patient. It's going to be a moving, evolving, changing process probably throughout their plan of care with you. And it probably will vary patient to patient, right? It's not going to be the same for every single person. So giving them that customized attention, that personalized attention, that's why they come to see you. That's what sets you apart. It's what makes you different. And it's why you can deliver amazing results for every single patient. One last little tidbit on this because again, I know schedules and consistency is really hard for people. So one of the tips that I give all of my dancers is to try habit stacking. So maybe they're not sitting down in one sitting and doing all their exercises at the same time. Maybe, I've talked to a lot of colleagues who do the same thing. They're like, do your exercises when you get to the studio as your warm up. That's an awesome way to do things, right? That is one form of habit stacking. It may not work for everybody. Sometimes they're running into the studio and they don't have time for that. So can they habit stack throughout the day? Could they do their heel raises while they brush their teeth? Could they do their mobility stretches after they get out of the shower? What can you pair what you want them to do? What can you pair during the day for them so that it gives them that consistency, but it jogs their memory a little bit of like, what do I need to do? Oh, right, this is the time that I do this exercise. It takes 30 days to make a habit or whatever. So help them make it a habit by stacking it with another activity. Again, the only way you're going to know this is through conversations with your patient and adjusting and asking them what's working. You can help them come to these conclusions themselves of what's going to work versus me just telling them to do something. They can sort of come to that conclusion themselves, but we need to be part of the conversation and guiding them towards being able to make these decisions or have clarity around these decisions that they're making. I often will, I mentioned that I build out some bigger programs for people as they're nearing the end of their time with me, which are more for like the maintenance things. They're just on a strength and conditioning program at this point. They're kind of at the top of my pyramid. They're at that peak performance. What I still like to make sure that everyone walks away with is a quick and easy routine or plan of what to do if their pain does start creeping back in. Because we know that it's inevitable sometimes that there's going to be moments where that pain maybe returns a little bit or it starts to creep back up. And making sure that the dancer understands that that's a normal part of the process. And more importantly, giving them a plan for what to do when it happens. Even if it doesn't happen, they have a plan. They know what to do. They're going to feel confident. They're going to feel in control of their body and their pain. And they're not going to panic and feel like, physical therapy doesn't work. I don't want to do this anymore. They're actually going to feel like you've given them something tangible to walk away with beyond just their traditional strength and conditioning programming that we're getting them to, but actually a plan to walk away with of what if this happens. And that right there can be absolutely invaluable for our patients. So try some of those, techniques and see if that helps a little bit more in your clinical practice. All of this takes practice, right? It's a lot of figuring out what works for your clientele. It's a lot of trial and error. And as you become more experienced as a clinician, you'll start to learn the things that work really effectively and for certain types of patients that work really effectively. But there's always, really, there's good conversations that we can have around strategies that make this better and easier for us and for our patients. The last thing that I want to leave you with is actually something that we had this discussion in my mastermind just yesterday, and I thought that this was perfect to include in this video. Is that so the three T's. It actually was 4 T's. I'm gonna adjust a little bit. Sorry, Greg. I'm gonna adjust it to the 3 T's. So teach, touch, and tell. And I loved this. I felt like this was hit the nail on the head with what I actually do with every single client that walks in the door. So the first one, teach. And these are things you want to do every single session with your patients to help increase buy-in. So teach. Every week, every session, you need to teach them something of importance. Patient education is everything, right? It gives them clarity. It gives them the why. It gives them the how. We need to be teaching something every single session. Treat it almost like a mini workshop every single time they walk in your door. You can have it laid out ahead of time. When they come in for their eval, you kind of know, okay, this is roughly what I'm going to teach them each visit that they come in. Or it might just be something that comes up in conversation. But you must give them some real education every single time by the time they leave your clinic. The second one is touch. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, making sure in some sense that we are touching our patients. Now, it may not be physical touch. It may not be, they may not need manual therapy, but maybe it's just touching them with your words or with your gratitude for them being here, right? It doesn't need to be physical. It could be like in the emotional sense as well. That makes them feel heard and seen and that they're in the right place, that they chose the right therapist and the right clinic. And then the last one is tell. Tell is making sure so at the end of the visit, you are telling them what they are going to do moving forward. So you're basically recapping. I'm going to recap. Here's everything that we did today. Here's all the steps that we've hit. Here's what we're going to do next session when you come in, so they are prepared and ready. And then even touching on, and once we do that, then we'll be able to work on XYZ, right? To get you to the top of that pyramid or further down that patient process. So we're constantly revisiting what we did on visit 1 with them. We're revisiting the process of point A to point D, whatever it's going to be, to get them better and to get them not just out of pain, but get them lasting long-term results. We are revisiting that every single session. We're reminding them that, hey, you maybe did have a little bit of uptick in pain, but we said this was going to happen. We said it was, kind of a common thing that happens. We have a plan moving forward, and if we don't, we're going to make one today. But we have a plan. We're going to get you out of that pain. We're going to get back on track, and then here's what we're going to work on next. Whatever the scenario is, relate it back to that patient process. So hone in on your patient process so well that you can adapt it to any situation that comes up, but you're always relating your patient care back to it, and you are reminding the patient of where they are at in that process. It is so invaluable, you guys, so invaluable for being able to get them to adhere to the plan and not fall off when things get hard or easy or painful or whatever. There's a million excuses of why they could fall off your schedule. You must remind them of the process and where they're at and how they're going to get to a place where this doesn't become this problem that is chronic and keeps coming back. Keep them in clarity. Keep them on the path that you need them to be on. If they don't understand that and you don't relate things back, they will fall off your schedule. And to go along with that, they're probably going to be the group of people that says physical therapy doesn't work. They're not going to refer any friends to you. They're not going to tell your studio. So you have to make sure that you're doing really well with every patient that comes in the door. That's 10 potential referrals for you. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're getting them feeling good and out of pain and meeting all their goals. But then that's also your word of mouth referrals. And that is the most invaluable form of marketing. So we can do really well with each of these patients that walks in the door if we follow some of these strategies. And again, I think it's just about refining them as you go, learning as you go, adapting, changing your strategies based on the dancer that's in front of you. But hopefully this gives you guys some tangible things that you can walk away with today to start implementing and getting better buy-in from day one. So that is the episode for today. Thank you guys so much for joining me here on Unchoreographed, and we will see you next week. If you enjoyed today's episodes, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, I would love to hear from you guys. So if you want to leave me a review or a comment below, I'd love to hear. I'd love to keep the conversation going. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Everybody have a good day.